there's a segment of your population, if you look at who your most valuable customers are, or maybe your most profitable customers, that you can niche into and say that's where we're going to focus. And maybe you continue to do batch and blast to the rest. You get what I'm saying? But
Well,
then really
yeah,
start to
exactly.
segment and talk to that particular one and start testing. And
Well, I think a couple key points that you bring up are perfect. One thing is that I think that every company should have a consistent educational e-newsletter program, whether it's segmented or not.
uh-huh.
At least have that consistent educational piece because that'll make the other offers that you create so much more valuable. I really do believe that.
Okay.
I think the second thing is to your point about targeting this valuable audience. I love that whole thing. I was working with a financial services company, and we were looking at their e-newsletter campaign and their blog campaign, and we were really looking at their content. So we're sort of doing a mini content audit. So we're taking a look at all this content, and then we really went back and said, well, what's your most important customer? And they were talking about this, more than 200,000 annual income, and they do this and this and this. And then I'm looking at the content, and I'm like, this doesn't speak to them at all. You're
Exactly.
speaking to somebody that's out of college that's looking for a credit card, whatever. And I'm like, so you have a general content campaign that's not even targeting your most valuable readership. And then look at it from a readership standpoint. So you're not serving your reader.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is we need to create, and that'd be a great opportunity for what we're talking about, just say create a separate program, this content strategy specifically for that very niche group that you really want to target. Most of the time, companies actually are targeting that group and they're forgetting about the rest. But it's amazing that this company's like they're completely shutting out their most valuable audience.
Right.
But you can really do yourself and say, hey, even if it's the smallest audience, could be the most valuable, or it could be the most valuable strategy for you ongoing if you're launching products or services in the future targeted at that group.
That's right. Because, there's many times that we've talked about the 80-20 rule. You get 80% of your revenue from 20% of your customers. And this speaks to the same thing. It's just that all over again, except for really niching your target down and then coming up with a program just for them. Even if you do your consistent educational newsletter piece that might go out to your whole list, if you segment off this most valuable list and start testing, then as that gets successful, you could then just move that into other niches. Like you could start to look at, okay, what other niches do we have?
Absolutely, and and that's the wonderful thing about the tools that companies like yourself have, where you can niche this down so easily and you can test it. I love the experimentation. I mean, yes, it's based on a strategy, but you can experiment. And I think that as long as you're upfront and you're authentic with your customers and you're saying we're trying this, we're trying that, I think they love it.
Right,
I
right.
think, and they'll, if you do make a mistake, they'll forgive you. I think as long as you're upfront and authentic, and that's where most people, most companies have trouble being authentic. But
Right.
you can be today very easily.
Right. Now, talk to me a little bit more about what you mean by authentic, because I just want to make it really clear. We hear that word a lot now, and I think that I'm not sure that there's this broad understanding of what that looks like, because then it could start to look like, well, I'm just going to be really casual in my content with my users, like it's going to impact
Yep.
my voice, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. So, can you share with me a little bit
I,
about that?
I think that when I think about being authentic, I think a couple things. And first of all, it's not casual; it's being human. It's stopping the marketing speak that we're so used to creating press releases out of, and actually talking to people like they're human beings. So I think that's the one thing. I think the second thing is back to the beginning of our conversation is figuring out what you stand for. So I think the combination of just treating your customers like human beings and understanding what your story is, what you want to be an expert in, what your customers' informational needs are, you create an authentic voice from that.
Uh-huh.
And I think you're just really honest about your communications. So I mean, and then what does that mean? Like, okay, if you do that, what is born out of that? I think that's just, the way that you communicate on things like Twitter and Facebook, and the way that you can communicate consistently with your customers about certain things, and you talk about certain things. I think that it's hard to do that unless you have the first two things we talked about figured out.
Right,
Because you
exactly.
get in, and it's so hard in large companies. Like it's amazing to me, like companies like Southwest and JetBlue, that they are, and I would say that they're very authentic companies because they give the people that oversee the direct communications with their customers a lot of freedom and say, this is what we stand for. Here's who our customers are, and this is what we stand for. And they don't say you can't do this, you can't do that, but you kind of say, hey, here's the ballpark we live in. Have fun.
Right,
But I
right.
don't think that means casual. I think for for some brands like Southwest, it does mean casual
Yeah.
because that's how they're authentic.
Exactly.
But for financial services company, if you get real too lax and too casual, you come off as unprofessional.
Exactly.
So that might be that's not your voice.
Exactly, and then that would be an inauthentic voice for that kind of a firm to have. So,
Exactly, you're right. So if say you're a financial services company and you come off as casual, that's not being authentic. That's
Right.
being something that you're not. That's a really good
Exactly.
point.
So then this whole thing about authenticity is really about having an appropriate, just having the conversation, a truthful, honest, valuable conversation with your leads or your prospects or your target audience, your customers, in a way that you're it's like a conversation. It's not so much like, we're giving you the lowdown, but maybe it also invites participation. Would you say that that's a characteristic of it or not?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that the one way to think about it, I talked to somebody the other day about it because we were talking about buyer personas. And everybody's like, you create your own cutouts or your own pictures of who your buyer is.
Right.
We've talked about that forever. But I think what a lot of people don't say is, what if you were a person?
Yeah.
Who would you be?
Right.
That's how you figure out authenticity. Because then you're like, would you be the, 6'4" white guy who's in a suit that, doesn't want to get his shoes scuffed up? Or would or would you be somebody else?
Right.
What is that? And I think that helps you then understand, what your content strategy is, and that will just feed down into all your communications with your customers.
Yeah, so it's almost like a twist on the persona thing. I love what you said, because it's like, I can do personas for my target market, but I never do personas for me and my voice. Do you know what I mean?
I think we've got a blog post coming.
I think that's
we got to do that.
That's pretty cool, though. I mean, to think about, like, wow, that would give you, like, maybe you look at different pictures and say, is this you? Is this you? Who are you? And so when you're asking that, what do you stand for? It can all be embodied in pictures, and you could put together kind of maybe even a little collage that's kind of like who's your, like your corporate persona, and then have all your voice come out of that and have it be authentic to that you just identified.
No, that's a great point. I think we hit the nail on something.
Isn't that fun? I love that idea. I love that. Okay, well, I know that we're kind of running out of time. And so if you have to leave people with just a few thoughts at the end here, what are the few thoughts that you would leave people with?
I think that's a tough one. I would just say a couple of things and just a couple tips that make this whole process we're talking about easier. And I call it something like take your sales hat off, take your sales and marketing hat off, because everything that we do from a marketing standpoint almost always gets filtered through marketing speak. And when that happens, it's tough to really be successful in your content marketing. Okay. So what I would say is whoever is involved in the process of creating your content and your content strategy, you really have to be cognizant of the fact that you got to take that hat off and put on what I would call a publisher's hat, where you're really thinking about the needs of your audience. You know who your audience is, you know what their needs are, and you know what? You've probably done calls to them to figure out what those needs are. Right. That's what a really good editor does. That's what a good publisher does. But marketers don't usually do that. We make lots of assumptions. We take data and we say, okay, how do we sell more products and services and throw it into this content and make things happen?
Right.
Well, it's harder and harder to do that kind of thing today because, it's all about engagement. It's all about actually getting people to pay attention to us, and they're not going to pay attention to our sales stuff.
Right.
They're going to pay attention to our really educational, helpful stuff.
Right.
So I would just say, take a step back, take your marketing hat off, take your sales hat off, put the publishing hat on, and then start the content strategy meeting. Because if you don't talk about it, you automatically start thinking about sales figures and numbers you have to hit, and it's very hard to actually get a good content strategy done that way.
Exactly. All right. Well, very cool. Now, also then to finish this up, and I just want to thank you so much for having this conversation. I think we actually generated some really great ideas that are going to be really super helpful to folks. So
that's all we want to do. We just want to be helpful, right?
Exactly.
You got it.
So let people know if they want to find out more about you or follow you, say how they might do that. And then also, if they want to get your book, they can just go out to Amazon, right?
They can go to Amazon, type in "get content," "get customers," or "get content." It comes right up. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to Joe Pulizzi, PULIZZI.com. And then if anybody ever needs a content marketing expert or a brand that really needs help with your content marketing, go to Junta42, JUNTA 42, and we'll hook you up for free with a content expert.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Thanks, Kim. Anytime.
Okay.